After my wife died, her children said, "We want all the assets, the house, the cars, the business, everything." My lawyer begged me to fight to the end. I said, "Let them have it all." Everyone thought I'd gone crazy. At the final hearing, I signed the papers. The kids smiled until their lawyer started trembling while reading. My name is Ralph Morrison. 19 years ago, I married Carol, a woman who already had two grown sons from her first marriage. I never tried to replace their father, and they never treated me like family. I was always the outsider who happened to share the same last name. Still, Carol and I built a good life together in Portland. We turned her late husband's small bike shop into a chain of 4 outdoor stores across the Pacific Northwest. We bought the big Craftsman house on the West Hills and a peaceful cabin up on Mount Hood, where we spent weekends away from the rain. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then, 3 months ago, Carol collapsed in our kitchen. Heart attack. Massive. The doctors did everything they could, but she was gone before the ambulance even reached the hospital. I sat in that waiting room alone, holding the phone that kept buzzing with messages I couldn't bring myself to read yet. The funeral was small. Her sons flew in, stood beside me in dark suits, shook hands with people who told them how sorry they were. They called me Dad that day in front of everyone. It sounded strange coming from them, like a word they were borrowing for the occasion. A few days later, the flowers were still fresh when they came to the house. Both of them. Kyle, the older one, walked in first, straight-backed eyes, scanning the living room like he was already measuring walls. Austin followed, softer around the edges, carrying that look of practiced sympathy I'd seen too many times over the years. They didn't waste time on small talk. They laid documents on the coffee table and told me calmly and precisely exactly what they expected. The house, the cabin, the business, everything that Carol and I had worked for. They said it belonged to blood to family, and in their version of family, I didn't count. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I told them I'd think about it. They grinned, then small, satisfied grins like the deal was already done. People who knew me, old friends, a couple of employees from the stores called and said I should fight. My lawyer practically shouted at me to contest the will. They all thought I was giving up too easily. Some even whispered that grief had broken me. They didn't know what I'd found tucked inside Carol's jewelry box 2 nights earlier. They didn't know about the calm certainty that had settled over me the moment I saw it. And they definitely didn't know what Carol had been planning in the months before she died. Stay with me until the end, because what happened at that final hearing changed everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment with the city you're in right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And keep watching. You won't believe what came next. A few days after the funeral, I was sitting in the home office Carol and I shared, staring at invoices for the stores that suddenly felt meaningless. The house felt too still. I hadn't turned on the TV or radio since she passed. The silence suited the emptiness. The doorbell rang twice, sharp and impatient. I walked to the front door and opened it to find Kyle and Austin standing on the porch. Kyle, Carol's older son, 47, stood slightly ahead, shoulders squared, wearing a dark wool coat even though the Portland rain had paused for the moment. His face carried that same measured expression he always used in business meetings. Austin, 3 years younger, hung back half a step, hands in his pockets, offering the kind of sympathetic look that never quite reached his eyes. Ralph, Kyle said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." Austin followed, giving me a quick acknowledgement. "Yeah, it's time we sorted some things out." I closed the door behind them and led them into the living room. The same room where Carol and I had hosted holiday dinners, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where she'd laughed at stories I told about tricky customers at the stores. Now it felt like a stage set for something else entirely. They sat on the couch. I took the armchair across from them. Kyle placed a leather briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open with practiced efficiency. He pulled out a thick folder and set it down between us. "We've been going through Mom's papers with her attorney, Kyle," began, voice steady and professional. "There's a will that makes the distribution pretty straightforward. Austin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We know this is a tough time, Ralph. We're all hurting, but we need to handle the practical side so everyone can move forward. I nodded slowly, waiting. I'd expected this conversation eventually, but not this soon. Kyle opened the folder and slid several pages toward me. The house here in Portland valued around 1.2 million goes to Austin and me jointly. The cabin on Mount Hood about 800,000 also to us. The 4 outdoor stores inventory leases, everything total assets roughly 600,000 split between us as well. Each number landed like a quiet punch. This house where Carol and I had raised no children together but had made a life anyway. Where we'd planned renovations, planted the backyard garden, celebrated anniversaries. The cabin where we escaped on weekends, hiked trails in the summer, sat by the fire in winter. The business we'd grown from one small shop into something solid. I kept my face neutral. And me. Austin shifted slightly. There's the life insurance policy. $300,000. That's set aside specifically for you. Kyle added, it's more than fair given the circumstances. $300,000. For a 65-year-old man who'd spent almost 2 decades helping build that business, managing the books when Carol got overwhelmed, hosting supplier dinners, covering shifts when employees called out. $300,000 to start over completely. I looked at the pages in front of me. The language was cold, precise. What about the medical bills from Mom's final weeks? I asked. Kyle didn't blink. Insurance covered most of it, but there's an outstanding balance of roughly $220,000. Since you were her spouse and involved in the care decisions, the providers will look to you for payment. Austin's voice softened. It's not ideal, but legally the estate assets are separate. The debts tied to her care fall outside the inheritance. $220,000 in debt against $300,000 insurance money. That left me with $80,000 to rebuild an entire life. At my age. With no house, no business, no income stream. I leaned back in the chair. Carol and I talked about this kind of thing. She always said I'd be taken care of. Kyle gave a small, patient look. Mom made her wishes clear in the will. Blood family keeps the core assets. You understand? Austin agreed. We're not trying to be harsh. We're just following what she wanted. And we're giving you 60 days to stay here while you figure out next steps. That's generous. 60 days to pack up 19 years. To find somewhere else in a city where rents had skyrocketed. To walk away from everything we'd built. I looked around the room. The built-in bookshelves Carol had designed. The big windows overlooking the backyard maples she loved. The framed photo on the side table, us on a trail near Mount Hood last fall, arms around each other, smiling like nothing could touch us. Kyle closed the folder. We'd like to move forward quickly. Probate can drag on, but if you sign a waiver of claims, we can wrap this up in weeks. Austin added, it's better for everyone, less stress all around. They both watched me, waiting for agreement. Kyle's expression said he was already thinking about next steps, maybe listing the house, maybe rebranding the stores. Austin's softer look said he was ready to offer comfort if I needed it, but only on their terms. I picked up the pages, scanned them again. The signatures looked real. The notary stamp looked real. Everything looked real. I'll need to read this carefully, I said finally. Of course, Kyle replied, standing. Take a day or two. But the sooner we finalize, the sooner we can all heal. Austin stood too. We're here if you want to talk, Ralph. Really. They let themselves out. I heard their car doors close, the engine start, tires on wet pavement as they pulled away. I sat there a long time, the folder still in my hands. The silence returned heavier now. They thought they'd laid everything out cleanly. They thought I'd accept it because I always had stepped back. Stayed in the background, let Carol's sons take the lead when it came to family matters. What they didn't know was that Carol had never been one to leave things to chance. Later that evening, while sorting through her dresser drawers, my fingers brushed against something tucked beneath her scarves. It was a small black USB drive, no label, wrapped in a silk scarf at the bottom of Carol's jewelry box. I almost missed it. The box had been sitting on her dresser since the day she died untouched, because I couldn't bring myself to open it sooner. But that evening, after Kyle and Austin left, I finally started going through her things, sorting earrings into piles, deciding what to keep, what to donate. When my fingers closed around the drive, something felt off. Carol wasn't secretive by nature, but she was careful. She always said important things belonged in places people wouldn't look by accident. I turned the drive over in my hand. It was light, ordinary looking. No reason to think it held anything special. Still, I slipped it into my pocket and finished emptying the drawer. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept thinking about the way Kyle had laid out the numbers, the way Austin had offered that gentle look while delivering bad news. By morning, I'd made up my mind to get a second opinion. I called Donald Pierce, the attorney Carol had used for years to handle the business side of the stores. He'd drafted contracts for suppliers, reviewed leases, helped us expand from 1 location to 4. If anyone could tell me whether that will was ironclad, it was him. His office sat in a low glass building downtown overlooking the Willamette River. I parked, walked through the lobby, and took the elevator to the 8th floor. Donald met me at reception himself, mid-60s, salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of calm presence that made clients feel taken care of. He shook my hand firmly and led me back to his corner office. "Ralph, I'm so sorry about Carol," he said as we sat down. "She was a remarkable woman." "How are you holding up?" I shrugged. "One day at a time." He folded his hands on the desk. "What can I do for you today?" I pulled the folder Kyle had left and slid it across to him. "Her sons brought this over. They say it's her will. I'd like you to look at it." Donald opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and started reading. The room was still, except for the occasional turn of a page. After several minutes, he leaned back, expression troubled. "This is not what I expected," he said carefully. "Carol updated her estate plan with me about 4 years ago. The version I have leaves everything jointly to you and her sons, with you retaining lifetime rights to the house and a majority share of the business." I felt a flicker of hope. "So this one they showed me isn't valid?" He shook his head slowly. "I can't say that yet. If she executed a newer will after our last meeting, it would supersede the old one. But there are questions here. The date on this document is only 6 months before she passed. Her health was declining then. We could raise issues of capacity, undue influence, especially if the boys were pushing her." He tapped the page. "Contesting it wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be impossible either. We could delay probate for months, maybe longer. Force them to negotiate. You have a strong case for staying in the house, keeping income from the stores." I listened, watching the river traffic below his window. Barges moved slowly against the current. A crew team rowed in perfect rhythm. "How long would a fight take?" I asked. "Realistically, a year. Maybe 2 if they dig in. And in the meantime, you'd have to cover living expenses, legal fees. The medical bills they mentioned, those stay your responsibility until the estate settles. But if we win, you'd recover most of it." I thought about living in limbo for 2 years. Court dates, depositions, Kyle and Austin on the other side of a conference table staring me down. The stores suffering while ownership hung in the air. Employees wondering who to listen to. Customers drifting away. Donald leaned forward. "Ralph, I've known Carol a long time. This doesn't feel like her. She talked about you constantly, how you steadied the business, how you took care of her. She wanted you secure. I think we owe it to her to push back." I appreciated the conviction in his voice. Part of me wanted to say yes, to fight for what we'd built together. But another part, the part that had sat alone in waiting rooms, that had watched Carol slip away, felt exhausted before the battle even started. "What if I don't contest it?" I asked quietly. "What if I sign whatever they need and walk away?" Donald removed his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth. You'd be giving up any claim to the house, the cabin, the business. You'd keep the insurance payout minus the medical debt. Legally clean break. It could be done in weeks. He paused. But Ralph, you'd be walking away from millions. I've never had a client voluntarily do that. I looked out the window again. The rowers had turned heading downstream now, letting the current carry them. I'm tired, Donald, I said. Tired of being the outsider in my own marriage. Tired of pretending everything's equal when it never was. If this is what Carol wanted in the end, maybe I should respect it. He studied me for a long moment. Grief does strange things. I'm not going to let you sign anything today. Take a week. Think it over. But I already knew. Fighting would drag everything into the open years of tension, the distance between me and her sons, the way I'd always felt like a guest in their family story. I didn't have the stomach for it. I don't need a week, I told him. Draft whatever releases they need. Let's get it done. Donald sighed heavily. If you're sure. I am. He came around the desk, placed a hand on my shoulder. Carol would want you happy, Ralph. Whatever you decide. I nodded, thanked him, and left the office. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady the way it does in Portland. I pulled up my collar and walked to my car. Back home that afternoon, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop for the first time. The screen lit up with a single folder named For Ralph, open privately. I hesitated, then double-clicked it. Inside were several files, scanned letters, bank statements, emails, a private investigator's report, and one document titled Letter to Ralph.docx. I opened that first. The words were in Carol's voice, even though they were typed. She'd always preferred writing things out when they mattered. My dearest Ralph, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the boys have started showing their true intentions. I'm sorry I kept this from you while I was alive. I needed to be certain, and I didn't want to put you through the worry until I had proof. It started about a year ago. Kyle began asking unusual questions about the business finances, how much liquid cash we kept, what the properties were worth without mortgages. At first, I thought he was just taking an interest. Then Austin started coming by more often, offering to help with paperwork. I noticed small discrepancies in the store accounts. Money moving in ways that didn't add up. I hired a private investigator quietly. What he found broke my heart. Kyle has been pouring money into high-risk outdoor gear ventures startups that promise huge returns, but mostly fail. He owes over $350,000 to private lenders, the kind who don't wait patiently. He was counting on inheriting enough to cover it all. Austin set up a side consulting company that was supposed to help clients invest retirement savings. Instead, he siphoned funds into his own accounts. He's taken nearly $400,000 that wasn't his. Several elderly clients have started asking questions. He's one audit away from serious trouble. They weren't visiting me more because they suddenly cared. They were positioning themselves to take control the moment I was gone. I couldn't let them steal from you, from us, after everything you've given this family. So I made my own plan. First, I moved the real savings, $5.2 million that we built together over the years, into an account at a different bank, under a trust accessible only by you. The boys think most of our wealth is tied up in the house, cabin, and stores. They're wrong. Second, I took out heavy mortgages on the house and cabin over the past 10 months. $1.4 million on the Portland house, $1 million on Mount Hood. The cash from those loans went straight into the protected account. On paper, the properties now carry more debt than they're worth. Third, 6 weeks before the end, I executed a new will with a different attorney. The original is safe with him. It leaves the decision about what, if anything, Kyle and Austin receive entirely to you. I trust your judgment completely. The life insurance policy they know about is real, but it's $500,000, not $300,000. The extra is for you to start fresh if you choose. Ralph, I know this feels cold, but they forced my hand. They were willing to leave you with almost nothing while they paid off their mistakes with money we earned together. I couldn't let that happen. Take the protected money. Live well. Decide what they deserve, if anything, on your own terms. I love you more than I ever managed to say out loud. Carol, I read it twice, then a third time. My hands were steady, but something inside shifted hard. All the years I'd felt like an extra in their family story, all the times I'd stepped aside to keep peace, Carol had seen it, and she'd acted. I closed the letter and opened the next files. Bank statements confirmed the $5.2 million in an account bearing only my name. Mortgage documents showed the lien's total debt $2.4 million. A medical report from an independent neurologist stated plainly that Carol's mental capacity had been sharp right up to her final weeks. No question of diminished ability. The private investigator's report was thorough: photos of Kyle at investor meetings in Seattle, records of his loans, screenshots of Austin transferring client funds. Enough evidence for criminal charges if it ever came to that. Last was a scanned copy of the real will. The language was simple and ironclad, everything passed to me with a clause giving me sole discretion over any gifts to her sons. I sat back in the chair. The house around me, the one Kyle and Austin thought they'd soon own, was underwater by hundreds of thousands. The cabin they pictured as their weekend getaway carried the same burden. The stores would come with leases and inventory, but no cushion to cover the coming payments. Carol hadn't just protected me. She'd turned their greed into a trap. They weren't inheriting wealth. They were inheriting obligations they couldn't possibly meet with their existing debts. I ejected the drive carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and drove to the bank branch we'd used for years. The manager, a woman who'd known Carol well, led me to a private room without questions. I sat there alone for nearly 2 hours, rereading everything, letting it sink in. Carol hadn't abandoned me. She'd outmaneuvered them while fighting her own illness. She'd trusted me to finish what she started. When I left the bank, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, like the city had washed itself overnight. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Austin. A couple of weeks after that, Austin and Haley invited me to a family gathering at their place. The invitation came by text from Austin: Haley, and I would love to have you over this weekend. Just a small family get-together before everything gets finalized. Kyle will be here too. We think it'll be good for all of us. I stared at the message for a minute, then typed back that I'd come. Saturday evening. Their house sat in a newer subdivision west of the city. Big windows, 3-car garage, the kind of place that looked expensive from the street. Haley answered the door in a sleek dress, hair perfect, smile wide. She was 42, always polished, always ready to show off whatever new upgrade they'd added. "Ralph, you made it," she said, pulling me into a quick hug that smelled like expensive perfume. Come in, come in." Austin appeared behind her, holding a bottle of wine. "Glad you're here. Let's keep things positive." Kyle was already in the living room, standing by the fireplace with a glass in hand. He acknowledged me with a short nod. "Ralph." The house felt staged. New leather sectional, massive TV mounted above the mantel, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's cars. Haley gave me the tour anyway. Open kitchen with quartz counters, backyard patio with a built-in grill, downstairs game room complete with pool table. Dinner was grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, some fancy salad Haley said she'd found in a magazine. We sat around their long farmhouse table, candles lit, music playing softly in the background. Austin raised his glass first, to Mom, and to moving forward together. We drank. The wine was good. Everything was good on the surface. Conversation stayed light at first. Haley talked about a recent trip they'd taken to the coast, showed photos on her phone of the view from their hotel. Kyle mentioned a new supplier he'd lined up for the stores once the transfer went through. Austin asked how I was sleeping, if I needed help packing anything. They circled back to the paperwork eventually. Kyle set his fork down. "Donald Pierce said you're ready to sign the releases. That's great news. Haley smiled. It'll be such a relief to have it all settled. Austin agreed. We can get the keys transferred, start planning some updates to the house. Nothing major, just freshening things up. I took a bite of salmon, chewed slowly. I've been going through more of Carol's things. Found some documents I didn't expect. 3 pairs of eyes flicked toward me. Kyle kept his voice even. What kind of documents? Nothing too exciting, I said. Old bank records, some account numbers I don't recognize, a few notes in her handwriting about financial moves she made last year. Haley laughed lightly. Mom was always organized. Probably just housekeeping stuff. Austin leaned in. If you're unsure about anything, we can look at it together. No reason to complicate things now. I shrugged. I figured I should have someone neutral review them first. Make sure everything lines up before I sign away claims. Kyle's jaw tightened just slightly. There's nothing to worry about. The will is valid. I'm sure it is, I replied. But Carol was thorough. She might have left instructions I haven't found yet. The temperature in the room shifted. Haley stood abruptly. Who wants dessert? I made that berry cobbler you like. She hurried to the kitchen. Austin followed to help. Kyle stayed seated watching me. You're not having second thoughts, are you? He asked quietly. Not at all, I said. Just being careful. Like your mom would have wanted. He didn't respond right away. When Haley and Austin returned with dessert plates, the conversation moved to safer topics, whether a new trail near Mount Hood, plans for the stores under their management. But the ease was gone. Smiles came slower. Questions felt sharper. After cobbler, Kyle walked me to the door while Austin and Haley cleared the table. If you find anything confusing in those papers, he said, hand on my shoulder, bring them to us first. We'll sort it out as family. I met his eyes. I appreciate that. His grip lingered a second longer than necessary before letting go. Driving home through the dark suburbs, I watched their house shrink in the rearview mirror. The lights stayed on late that night. I could imagine the conversation inside. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. Mr. Morrison, this is Victor Shaw. I believe Carol left instructions for me to contact you if you reached out after discovering certain materials. I pulled over to the side of the road. How do you know about that? She was very specific, he said. If you accessed the drive and hadn't signed anything irreversible within a reasonable time, I was to call. We should meet as soon as possible. We arranged to get together the next afternoon at his office in Southeast Portland. The building was an older brick walk-up, nothing flashy. His suite was on the second-floor, door simply marked Victor Shaw, Attorney at Law. Inside, the space felt lived-in, wooden desk piled with organized files, bookshelves full of legal volumes, a couple of framed landscape photos on the walls. Victor stood to greet me, early 60s, trim build, steady eyes behind rimless glasses, the kind of quiet competence that didn't need to announce itself. He closed the door, motioned to a chair across from his desk. Thank you for coming so quickly. I sat. Carol hired you. About 10 months ago, he confirmed opening a thick file, initially for some discreet financial restructuring. As she uncovered more about her son's situations, the scope grew. He slid a business card across, simple, no fancy logo. She didn't want anyone connected to the old firm involved. Too much risk of information leaking. I nodded, waiting. Victor leaned back slightly. Carol was sharp until the end. She suspected Kyle and Austin were positioning themselves to take control of the estate, while portraying you as an outsider who'd be generously provided for. She decided to protect you and to let them face consequences. He spread several documents across the desk. Mortgage records first. These are the liens she placed on the properties. 1.4 million on the house here, 1 million on the cabin. The funds went into the trust account only you can access. Next came trust statements. $5.2 million invested conservatively, undisturbed. Then the will. This is the executed version properly witnessed and notarized 6 weeks before she passed. It revokes all prior wills and leaves full discretion to you regarding any distribution to Kyle or Austin. I scanned the language. Straightforward. Absolute. Victor continued. She also wanted you to understand the exposure the boys face, the investigators' findings, Kyle's unsecured loans from aggressive lenders, Austin's diversion of client funds rise to the level of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under Oregon law. Civil claims alone could strip them of any inheritance and require repayment. Criminal referral is possible if you choose. He placed the investigator's summary in front of me. Detailed timelines, copies of transfers lender correspondence, enough to make a prosecutor pay attention. Carol didn't want revenge, Victor said softly. She wanted fairness. She believed you'd decide what fairness looked like. I sat with it all for a minute. The room was still except for traffic noise drifting up from the street. What happens if I transfer the properties to them anyway? They inherit the titles and the full mortgage obligations. Banks will demand payment or foreclosure. Given their existing liabilities, refinancing isn't realistic. They'd be underwater immediately. And if I keep everything, you walk away secure. They receive nothing beyond memories. Their creditors remain their problem. I thought about the gathering the night before, the forced smiles, the quick subject changes when I mentioned documents. They were already nervous. Victor closed the file. There's no rush to decide, but the longer you wait, the more they'll pressure. Carol prepared a gift deed template if you choose to transfer the properties with their debts intact. It's legal irrevocable once accepted and entirely your call. He handed me copies of everything in a plain envelope. Take these home. Read at your pace. Call when you're ready for next steps. I stood, shook his hand. She planned every detail. Victor nodded. She did. And she trusted you to finish it right. I left the office carrying the envelope, feeling the weight of it more than the paper inside. Over the following days, messages from Kyle and Austin started coming faster. The messages kept coming one after another like they couldn't stop themselves. Austin sent a voice note first thing the next morning. Dad, hope you slept okay. We're all set to meet Donald whenever you are. Just say the word and we'll make it happen this week. Everyone needs closure. I listened once, deleted it. Kyle followed with a text. Ralph, the probate attorney, is asking for progress. Let's not let this stretch out longer than necessary. We can sign and be done. Later that afternoon, Austin again. Thinking about you. If the medical bills are weighing heavy, we can discuss options once the transfer goes through. Family looks out for family. I showed Victor the growing thread when I stopped by his office the day after. He scrolled through, expression neutral. They're ramping up the emotional pull now. Guilt, urgency, vague promises. Standard when someone senses control slipping. I agreed. They're starting to repeat themselves. Victor pulled out the draft he'd been working on. This is the gift deed. It conveys the Portland house, the Mount Hood cabin, and full ownership of the 4 outdoor stores to Kyle and Austin jointly. He turned the page. No warranties, no adjustments. They take title subject to all existing encumbrances, meaning the full $2.4 million in mortgages, transfers with the properties. I read the clauses carefully. Straightforward language, no escape hatches. On day 1, Victor continued, they'll be $800,000 upside down before accounting for their personal situations. Banks will send notices immediately. Refinancing won't be possible with their credit profiles. He added a second document. This companion agreement requires them to acknowledge receipt of the assets in their current state and release you from any future liability or claims related to the estate. I leaned back. What if they spot the trap and refuse? Then nothing transfers. The valid will controls. You retain everything, including the protected trust. Their creditors stay hungry. I pictured Kyle calculating numbers in his head, Austin trying to keep the peace while panic set in. They'd convinced themselves I'd fold quickly because I always had before. Victor notarized the blank spaces where dates and signatures would go. We can fill these in at the meeting. Donald's office is neutral ground. They'll feel safe there. The pressure built over the next few days. Kyle called twice, left voicemails about moving on with respect for Mom's memory. Austin sent links to moving services asking which one I preferred. Haley texted a photo of paint swatches for the living room, thought you might like to weigh in before we start. I responded minimally, or not at all. By Sunday evening, Kyle's tone shifted. Ralph, we need confirmation by tomorrow or the probate office will flag delays. This isn't helping anyone. I texted back a single line. Tuesday morning works. Donald's office. They confirmed immediately. Monday I met Victor one last time. We reviewed every page. He added a cover letter summarizing the transfer terms in plain language. No legalese tricks, just facts. I signed where needed. He made copies, organized the packet. You're calm, he observed. I've had time to get there, I said. Carol did the hard part. I'm just finishing it. He nodded. They'll try to negotiate when they see the numbers. Stay firm. I assured him I would. That night, I walked through the house one more time, not packing yet, just taking it in. The kitchen where Carol planned store expansions over coffee. The backyard trailhead we used for test hikes. The office where we'd celebrated good quarters and worried through lean ones. None of it was leaving my hands. But they didn't know that yet. Tuesday morning arrived clear and cold. I drove downtown early, parked, and walked into Donald's building with the envelope Victor had prepared. The conference room door was already open. Kyle and Austin were already seated when I walked in, Haley beside Austin. Donald Pierce sat at the head, papers neatly stacked. Victor followed me in and took the chair to my right. Kyle offered a tight look. Ready to get this done? Austin nodded. We appreciate you coming through, Ralph. Donald cleared his throat. I have the waiver documents prepared. Once signed, the estate can distribute according to the will on file. I placed my envelope on the table. There's an updated will that needs to be entered first. Donald frowned. Updated? Victor passed copies around. Executed 6 weeks before Carol's death. It revokes prior versions and grants Ralph sole discretion over any distribution to her sons. Kyle scanned quickly, face hardening. Austin read slower, eyes widening. Haley whispered something to Austin. He shook his head. Donald adjusted his glasses. This changes things significantly. I continued. I'm exercising that discretion today. I laid out the gift deed. This transfers the Portland House Mount Hood cabin and the outdoor store chain to Kyle and Austin, effective immediately. Relief flickered across their faces. Kyle leaned forward. That's more than fair. Thank you. With one detail, I said. The transfer is as is, including all existing liens, Victor clarified. Total mortgages of $2.4 million. The properties are worth roughly $1.6 million combined. Austin blinked. You're saying we inherit a negative $800,000 in equity before our own obligations? Correct. Haley's voice rose. That's not an inheritance. That's a trap. Kyle shot her a look, then turned to me. We can work something out. Split the trust account. Keep the house for you. We take the business. No, I replied. Carol's instructions were clear. This is the choice. Victor placed the investigator's report beside the deed. Declining the gift leaves the valid will in force. Ralph retains full control. These records detailing financial irregularities can be referred for civil claims under elder abuse laws. Kyle's knuckles whitened on the table edge. Austin stared at the pages. Donald shifted. Gentlemen, this is highly irregular. Haley started crying softly. We'll lose everything. Kyle tried once more. There has to be middle ground. I met his eyes. You drew the line when you planned to leave me with debts and a $300,000 policy. This is the middle ground you created. Silence stretched. They whispered among themselves. Minutes passed. Finally, Kyle picked up the pen. "We'll accept the transfer." They signed one by one, hands shaking or steady, it didn't matter. The notary stamped each page. When it was over, I stood. "This concludes all estate matters. No further contact except through counsel." Austin looked up. "Dad?" I walked out without waiting. 6 months later, the fallout was complete. Kyle filed for bankruptcy protection. Creditors forced the sale of what little he had left. He took a job stocking shelves at a big box outdoor retailer, entry-level pay. Austin and Haley separated quietly. She moved south to stay with relatives. He rented a one-bedroom downtown and picked up shifts managing a small gear shop. The house and cabin sold at auction to cover portions of the mortgages. The stores followed soon after. The chain Carol and I grew from nothing vanished. I never touched the debt-laden properties. Instead, I drew from the protected trust, bought a comfortable riverside cottage outside the city, simple, paid in full with a dock and a view of passing water. Days are peaceful now. I hike local trails, read in the evenings, help at a community center advising seniors on estate planning. No drama, no obligations. I cut all ties. No calls returned, no holiday cards, nothing. Some nights I sit on the porch and think about what happened. Greed didn't just cost them money. It cost them family long before any papers were signed. It turned opportunity into obligation and trust into suspicion. Carol saw it coming. She protected what mattered most, the person who stood by her without condition. If I've learned anything, it's that inheritance isn't about assets on a balance sheet. It's about who earns the right to carry forward what really lasts: respect, loyalty, love. Money can be rebuilt. Relationships once poisoned by entitlement rarely recover. Carol gave me security. She also gave me clarity. And that's worth more than any house or business ever could be.